Well, hi there. My name's David Kowalik of Godwit Ministries, and you join me today for the third part of our series entitled The Gospel in the Gospels. Now, as we saw in the previous two videos, what often passes for the gospel in contemporary preaching does not actually match what the writers of the four Gospels wrote about or what the apostles preached in the book of Acts. Now, that should be a little bit disconcerting. It is for me, at least. Now, why is that? Well, I'm arguing that we have unhitched the Gospels and the book of Acts from their original context and from its original history. And what we've done instead is that we have overlaid them with our own context and our own history, therefore altering the outcome and the meaning of the Gospel. I mean, imagine playing tennis, for instance, but changing the rules. Now, the resulting game that you might end up playing may look superficially similar to the original game, but the outcomes will in fact be very different. Now, if we are truly going to comprehend the original gospel and its original meaning, then it's vital that we understand the original rules, so to speak. Now, the rules that govern the four Gospels and the book of Acts is the context in which the Gospels were actually written. So we absolutely must ask ourselves this question. What did the original four authors of the four Gospels think they were communicating to their readers? What was their goal? Now, to answer that question, we must understand the history and the context in which they wrote. Now, the context and the history, of course, is the Old Covenant, the Old Testament. The entire Old Testament was the long setup for the coming of the Messiah and the inauguration of the kingdom of God in Israel that would be headed up by Jesus himself. So Jesus said as much in the Gospel of Matthew. In Matthew chapter 5, verses 17 to 18, Jesus said, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, nor the least stroke of the pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished." Now, by law and prophets here, Jesus was not merely talking about keeping some kind of moral code in the Old Covenant. He was saying so much more than that. Jesus was telling his disciples that he was going to tie up all the unfinished storylines and all the covenant promises and all the other promises that were recorded in the Old Testament. Everything written in it must be accomplished, to put it in the words of Jesus. Now, you might remember the story of Jesus meeting the two disciples on the road to Emmaus. That's recorded in Luke 24, 18 to 27. Now, I'd give anything to have the chance to get a recording of that conversation, and I live in hope that one day an archaeologist will dig up some old cassette tape or some other ancient audio of that Bible study, which would have to rate as the best Bible study of all time. Anyway, Luke writes that Jesus explained to those disciples what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself, beginning with Moses, i.e. the law, and all the prophets. That's the rest of the Old Testament. That's all in Luke 24, verse 27. So as far as Jesus is concerned, the entire Old Testament is pointing to him and to his appearance in history. Now, when the disciples did fully understand who Jesus was and what he was all about, they realized that he was indeed the true Messiah, the hope of Israel, and through Israel, he would be the hope of the whole world. Consequently, this is what they were trying to do. They wanted to communicate to everyone everywhere that Jesus is that one. And to achieve that, they wanted to prove to the world by what they wrote that Jesus definitely is that one, the Messiah, the very one predicted in the Old Testament who would be born in the line of David and become king of the world. Now, when we read from this perspective, we soon come to see that the gospel is not about how to get saved or even about atonement. Rather, it's all about who Jesus really is. Yes, those other elements are included, but the big story of the Gospels is the Messiahship of Jesus. Now, previously I explained how there are several main elements in the Gospels that methodically spell this out, that substantiate the truth, that Jesus is indeed the true Messiah. First of all, there are the signs at his birth, that he is a descendant of David from the line of Judah, that his coming would be preceded by a second Elijah, that he would be divinely anointed. There would be signs and miracles and deliverance that would corroborate this truth, and that he would fulfill the prophecies and the covenants. Finally, there is the defeat of death, the resurrection, and his ultimate glorification and the inheritance of the nations. These are the main elements of the Gospels. Sure, there are other themes besides that, but these are the main ones. Now, today, we're going to simply introduce one of the signs that fulfilled the prophecies concerning the birth of Jesus. Now, there's a short passage in the book of Micah that mentions a number of important signs that would have to be fulfilled at the birth of the Messiah. And all of these are indeed fulfilled by the birth of Christ. So let's read Micah chapter 5, 2-4. But you, Bethlehem, Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from old, from ancient times. Therefore, Israel will be abandoned until the time when she who is in labor bears a son, and the rest of his brothers return to join the Israelites. He will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they will live securely, and then his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth. All right, there are a number of elements in this short passage. Firstly, there is the fact that the Messiah would come from the line of Judah, which is attested to in Genesis 49, 8-10, where we read, Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow before you. Judah is a lion's cub, and from the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stooped down, he crouched as a lion, as a lioness, and who dares rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. Now that's all talking about how the power, the royal power, would remain with this one, the Messiah, who would come from the line of Judah and be a son of David. Now, secondly, there would be a period in which Israel will be abandoned, and that period would end when she, who is in labor, bears a son. Now, as it so happened, Daniel had predicted that after the exile there would be a period of some 490 years in which Israel would be adrift without a king or a prophet. And at the end of that period, the Messiah would come. And as it turns out, the coming of Jesus coincided precisely with that timeline. Up until then, Israel would drift like a boat without oars on the open sea. Daniel also predicted that there would be the rise and fall of three great kingdoms, the Babylonians, the Persians, and the Greeks, before the rise of a fourth kingdom, and it would be in the time of that fourth kingdom that the Messiah would appear. Nevertheless, that time would continue until the time when she who is in labor bears a son. Now, this is also triangulated by Isaiah, who prophesied that a virgin would become pregnant and that she would give birth to a son. Isaiah 7 verse 14. But the Lord will give you proof. A virgin is pregnant and she will have a son, and his name will be Emmanuel. Of course, Emmanuel means God with us, signaling the end of the period of abandonment. But Isaiah had more to say when he predicted in Isaiah 9, 6-7, For unto us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, and of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end, on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. Now, there's a whole lot going on in that passage, and we'll talk about that another time. But for now, we can see that Isaiah is predicting that when this great king comes, he would be like no other king, a perfect king. Now, we have to keep in mind that the gospel writers are fully aware of these storylines that are recorded in Micah. But there's one small detail that is yet to happen. The Messiah would need to be born in Bethlehem. But here's the problem. The Virgin Mary, she's pregnant, but she is in Nazareth, not in Bethlehem. Now, have you ever read a book or watched a movie that has a ton of tension with lots of unfinished loose ends and plot points that have yet to be concluded, but you can see that there's only a handful of pages left for all the unresolved tension to be dealt with? Now, this is precisely what was going on in Israel at that time. All the prophecies are falling into place. It's 490 years post-exile. It's in the time of the Romans. A virgin from the tribe of Judah in the line of King David is pregnant. But how will this last piece of the puzzle be put into place? Now, you might be familiar with the famous Christmas movie Die Hard, in which a well-trained, well-organised group of thieves, headed up by a certain Hans Gruber, set out to rob the Nakatomi Corporation of their treasures from the vault inside their corporate headquarters. Now, there are some 7 levels of security that must be defeated in order to access the vault. But the last door can only be opened if the power to the building is turned off from outside the building. And it looks like their robbery will be thwarted unless they get outside intervention. But Hans Gruber is unconcerned, and when the FBI turn up, they turn off the power and unwittingly play right into Gruber's plan. When the final door is opened, Gruber says, "I give you the FBI." Now, something like that happens to fulfill the prophecy of Micah. As Luke writes in Luke chapter 2, verse 1, "In those days a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered." And so that forced Mary and Joseph to return to Bethlehem, and Jesus the Messiah is born in Bethlehem precisely as Micah predicted. "I give you the Emperor of Rome." A Gentile emperor unwittingly does the bidding of God, and the final piece of the puzzle is put in place, and the Messiah is born in Bethlehem, precisely as Micah foretold, to a virgin from the line of Judah, as Isaiah prophesied at exactly 490 years post-exile, at the exact time predicted by Daniel. Could all these things have fallen in place by coincidence? I don't think so. Now, Luke wrote this knowing full well what he was writing, and this is just one small piece of the Gospels that are written to prove to the world, that is to you and me, that Jesus is indeed the Messiah and the hope of the world. And there's so much more that the Gospel writers write to prove beyond a doubt that Jesus is the Christ, the one who will, as Micah said, who will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they will live securely, for his greatness will reach the ends of the earth, which means his greatness will reach even places like where I live, Australia, the ends of the earth. Now, there's so much more to say and to see. So please stay with us until the end of this series, and I hope that when you have fully watched all of this series, you will come to the conclusion that the Gospels conclude that Jesus is the Messiah, and here is the proof. And that, after all, is really what the Gospel is all about. It's the proof. The Gospels are all about who Jesus is, that he is the Messiah, the King of the world. So please, if you will, subscribe to this channel and like this video and share it with as many people as you can. That will really practically help us. And you can visit us at godwit.com.au. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Bye for now.